We are back, the Ndebele Shona tensions, part 2. First, we talk about the arrival and settlement of Ndebele among the Karanga. This episode is about the political power tensions that follow and how Karangas and other ethnic groups were assimilated into the Ndebele or Mthwakazi state. Let's start with a brief history of the pre-colonial Bantu political structure. Although it varied across different regions, some had decentralized stateless systems without a central authority. Other Bantu societies were organized into separate systems where clan lineages were part of larger units. Southern Africa had centralized kingdoms or chiefdoms with a monarch, king or queen, and a hierarchical system of governance. These political structures often followed territorial or lineage-based divisions, with each group having its leaders and autonomy. Kinship ties and clan affiliations played a crucial role in political organization and alliance formations. These structures, without strict national borders, allowed the free movement of the Bantu people. According to Beach in the book Ndebele Raiders and Shona Power, upon reaching the Zambezi Limpopo Plateau, Mthwakazi and the Nguni ethnic group set out to build a kingdom. Due to the loss of so much militia, the military needed to be boosted and strengthened. How? Here is what happened. The previous Ngoni invasions had resulted in the loss of a great number of the prized rosary cattle, so there was a considerable shortage. The Ndebele, on the other hand, had plenty of cattle but desperately need more people. The result was that an exchange took place. Mthwakazi distributed cattle to the rosary in return for young people who were incorporated into the Ndebele state and society. This state of affairs extended over the eastern half of the Changamire state as far as Tsunga, the land between the upper Munyati River and the Mwanesi range. There, the Nyandoro dynasty had acted as intermediaries between the main Rosary dynasty and the peoples northeast of them. At some time in the 1850s and 1860s, Ndebele cattle were distributed there as well. However, it was impossible that this situation would endure for long without serious trouble. Firstly, the main Rosary dynasty had withdrawn into the hills that bordered the Changamire state to the east. There was little chance it would accept the loss of its position without trying to regain it. Secondly, the economic exchange created by the Ndebele was in the long run extremely disadvantageous to the Rosary and others who took part in it. Even though the Ndebele seem to have owned the cattle they distributed, milk and slaughter rights would have probably gone to the herders, but young people were not allowed to go back to their societies after the Ndebele levied them. According to Moffat, the Karanga regretted seeing their kids taken away from them just when they became useful to their parents, and this practice, taken too far, was going to ruin their community. As time passed, the Ndebele didn't need to recruit so much tributaries, causing less damage and creating less resentment. As a result of a serious grievance and the existing Rosary state organization, the first serious Karanga resistance broke out. We need to remember that Ndebele didn't believe in total war any more than Karanga did. After the fighting in 1854 and 1855 and Chief Chirumanzu's surrender in 1857, there was a pause. In August 1866, the Ndebele attempted to trade with Mashaya Mombe's people despite their attack on them earlier in the year. Although Ndebele raids were usually directed against specific targets on the borders of the king, other people in the area were also affected. The Ndebele famed military discipline, which existed more in literature than in reality, was prone to scattering in search of cattle and women across a wide area. This comes from all detailed accounts of Europeans living among the Karanga. These stories are a good example. March 1872 gives a picture of a series of raids that continued over about 3 weeks over a variety-wide front, from the western Duma on the Mtilikwe-Pokoteke confluence to the upper Pokoteke, an area of some 40 miles. The Karanga, who had at least 3 days warning, suffered various losses. They were rarely taken completely by surprise. The same portrayal comes from accounts of the 1892 raids on the country from Chivi to Gutu and those of 1893 on Zimuto. According to these stories, Ndebele raiders tended to follow up on their targets if they fled. For example, in 1883, they pursued people from the Chaminuka medium's base near the Umfuli to the northern Shawasha country beyond the Umwinzi. Even on a peaceful mission, such as the delivery of a message, Ndebele warriors would sometimes cover their expenses by raiding. Apart from the political threat of the Rori dynasty, the Karanga trade system played a huge role in fueling the Ndebele campaigns of the 1850s and 1860s. By inheriting the Changamire state, the Ndebele had inherited its basic economic power, which, despite a regional emphasis on cattle, was also aligned with the traditional exchange of gold and ivory for cloth and beads. Even during the fighting of the 1850s, the trading system linking the Ndebele with the Zambezi and the coast through the northeastern area continued to function. However, by the time it had become clear to Mthwakazi that the Rori were difficult to remove from their mountain strongholds, although supplies of both guns and cloth were available through the various friendly, neutral or hostile Karanga dominions to the east, the Ndebele should have controlled the trade routes to a greater extent. The expansion of the Ndebele began to the northwest. However, one reason for this was probably that the Ndebele state was too weak in the 1840s to attempt a more heavily populated and better defended route to the northeast. The area to the northwest was badly watered and almost unoccupied, and thus offered no resistance. The raiders could easily cross it to strike at the people under Wange, Pashu and Saba on the Deka, Gwai and Zambezi rivers. Despite being vulnerable, these people also gave access to one of the trade routes to the sea. The route along the Zambezi through the Tonga area to Zumbo, Tete, Sena and the sea was economically usable despite the distance that could be covered by some sort of water transport. By the early 1850s, the Ndebele appear to have established their authority over the Zambezian communities, especially after the death of Wange in 1853. Even though raids happened occasionally on the area for various reasons for the Ndebele state to survive, oral history from within the Rori clan in Insiza suggests that Mthwakazi extended his policy of cooperation within the Rori to the point of requesting Towe Chipi to return from exile in the Eastern Highlands and settle down in his own country, and that it worked for a while before Towe Chipi broke away. There is no doubt that Ndebele tried to get the Mutinima house to join them, but they refused. In the 1850s, there was a rapid revival of the Rori political power. They seem to have suppressed their differences enough for the Mutinima group to recognize the paramountcy of Towe Chipi. Even the Swabaswi house broke away from the Ndebele and joined the Rori Mambos. But it seems there was no Rori command over the rest of the Karanga speakers. Some of the Rori under Lukuluba and Rosani remained under the Ndebele, and historical accounts are full of stories of quarrels and warfare among the Rori and rulers such as Wata, Gutu, and people of the upper Sabi Valley. Other Karanga rulers did attack the Ndebele at the same time as the Rozi, but it appears to have been on their initiative. Early in the 1850s, the Ndebele demand for young people provided the main motive for the Karangas' resistance to the Ndebele rule. Having been inspired by the revival of the Changamire dynasty, the resistance took on a very traditional tone. According to Beach, the Shona turned on Ndebele this time. Raiders from the Karanga broke into Ndebele territory, looting cattle and abusing women. The most famous raiders were Mambotowe Chipi, Mutinima, and Chizema, son of Govera ruler Chirumanzu. The raids provoked a Ndebele reaction that was too strong for the Karanga to handle. The battleground was on the Mpopoti Mountains, east of the Ndebele state, the area of another Rozi ruler, Lembeu Pengobuta, and Umgulugulu Guruguru Mountain against the Mari ruler Zingwe, who he had previously killed for refusing to supply young people as tribute. Towe Chipi, forced to retreat, fled through Chivi past Nyaningwe Hill towards Zimbabwe. Around that area, he won the Battle of Chikato by employing strong Zambezi traders Ritunya, who possessed guns. Earlier, he had defeated the Ndebele, earning himself the name Chibambam. The fighting continued into 1854 and paused. By 1857, the situation had resolved itself in Mthwakazi's favor. The Chirumanzu dynasty surrendered early, and from the late 1850s until 1889, they were a strong ally of the Ndebele. Remember, Chirumanzu helped Chizema on his prominent Ndebele raids and also on his failed attempt to win a new land in southern Buyera in the following years. As a result of all this, it appears that the Rozi suffered from a lack of unity among the local Karanga. On another note, Mthwakazi devoted as much effort to the defeat of Towe Chipi and Wata, who was the ruler of a comparatively small economic rich Hera polity at the head of the Mazowe Valley. The continued control of Wata by Ndebele rule until 1889 shows that Mthwakazi was full aware of the economic value of Wata's area and planned to profit from it. After a peace period from 1854 to 1860, by late 1873, the Ndebele concentrated on their effort to dominate the Karanga. They raided a wide area from Chivi in the east to Mangwende in the northeast and Wata in the north. In the northern areas, few raids mentioned in historical books most probably occurred during this period. Let us take note that the Ndebele were a few to cover all these areas at once. The main strength of the kingdom was focused against the Ngwato to the southwest. To the northwest, the visible effort was a raid by the Ndebele associate on the Deka River area, while another force raided Wata's associate Chiweshe in the upper Mazowe Valley. The Ndebele effort of the 1860s was narrowed to a few raids to the northeast and to the southeast. On the east, the Chivi, Bere, Zimuto and the Njanja people were attacked in 1861. The impact of the attack was more on Bere's Mari, who were severely weakened. The Chivi's Mari surrendered to the impact of newly imported guns and became tributary to the Ndebele. The ambition of Chivi's son Makonese, in combination with the Ndebele expansion, led to the deaths of both Chivi and Bere. The attack on the Njanja above led the Ndebele into contact with Changamire Towe Chipi of the Rozi, who took refuge in the Hera area dominated by the two Hera rulers, Mutekeza and Nyashanu. The Rozi, led by the Mambo Towe Chipi Chibambamu and his cousins of the Mutinima house, controlled hills on the frontier between Nyashanu and Gambiza around Bedza and the Mavangwe range. Historical evidence shows that three main attacks by the Ndebele were made to get rid of the threat posed by the remnant of the Rozi. Up to 1866, under siege Towe Chipi surrendered. He was brought to Mthwakazi but later allowed to leave. Oral history says that he left Mavangwe and went to Gutu, where he died. Later, after Mthwakazi's era, Historical evidence of the 1873 Mtikana Mafu force against the Roji in the Gutu area shows that the defeat of 1866 did not end the Roji resistance to the Ndebele.